Okay, it's starting? All right, okay. Okay, hopefully this works here. I don't know. To me, it just seems like it was just too close. Hopefully, let me just take a look again here. Okay, I think I do need to put it. Okay, and then down a little bit like that. All right. Okay, so what I'm doing here is a little bit of a teaching on Buddhism. I'm going to cover the teachings of the Buddha himself, all right? Specifically, here's what I want to cover, the 3 marks of existence. Hopefully you can still see me. Oh, I'm a little bit too crammed in here, I think. The 3 characteristics of existence. So here, the Buddha basically comes up with what he holds to be the 3 key fundamental principles that shape, determine, characterize reality itself. Okay, they're often called the 3 marks of existence. Fundamental features, all right, that constitute reality. Okay, and they are the Doctrine of Impermanence, the Doctrine of No Soul, and the Doctrine of Suffering. And I'm going to go through these first. And I've just got written here in Pali, it's referred to as Nitya and Sanskrit, and Nitya. Okay, again, Pali and Sanskrit. Pali is the dialect for early Buddhism, and Sanskrit is the language that was used in later Buddhism, like Mahayana Buddhism. Okay, and there you go, these 3. Then after this, I think on a separate video, I'm going to do the Doctrine of Dependent Co-origination. All right, and then, well, I might not here, but later I still need to cover the 4 Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, and the whole understanding of Nirvana, what Nirvana all implies and consists of, and what it's really all about. All right, so hopefully that all makes sense. And I'm just going to now go into the 3 marks of existence, beginning with the Doctrine of Impermanence. Okay, and now most people think, sure, reality is constantly changing. There is nothing that's solid, permanently there in an unchanging way. There's constant flow, movement, and change. So a metaphor that would be used, for example, is say if you're sitting in a chair, and fine, you try not to move, you don't try to create any change, you're just sitting there. Well, even if you try not to change, there's still change. After a while, your body will get sore and you'll be in pain. Eventually, you know, you'll starve to death and die, all right? And then you'll just be bones and skin that will fall apart there and decay, and then the chair will eventually fall apart. So even if you don't try to change, change is inevitable. I mean, that's the nature of reality. There's constant change. Nothing is permanent. Nothing stays the same, okay? So we're, first of all, deluded to think there's such a thing as solidity and that there's something unchanging to reality. A fundamental nature, characteristic of reality is constant flow, movement, and change. Okay. Now, the thing is Siddhartha went beyond that. You know, sure, we can get that idea, but he went even deeper. And the place where I like to start to understand this more fully is with respect to the self. Okay. So here I am today, you know, giving this little talk here. And you think that, well, this is the same person that was here a year ago, 10 years ago. I still have blue eyes, dark hair. You know, I'm 5'6", whatever. You know, there's so many similar features about me. So there's so many aspects of reality because we have an experience of continuity, where I could show up as basically the same person. I all of a sudden didn't grow to be 7 feet tall and my eyes turned brown. You know, I always show up and look the same, all right, and have the experience of continuity, of being the same person. And you have the experience of encountering me as an unchanging, continuous person, a continuous reality. And even say in this room, you know, it's the same bedroom, the same bed, the same walls, the same chairs, the same furniture, the same car you drive. From our experience of continuity, we draw the conclusion that the basis of that continuity is an unchanging substance. Okay? And that's what we generally tend to think about this world, about this, what we call the material world, that it's made up of different things, objects that are of an unchanging, permanent substance, because we have the experience of continuity. Well, Siddhartha blows that up. Okay, he blows that up, and says that no, this is the massive delusion that we're living under, that there's solidity to things, that things are unchanging in any kind of a way. And this is what's going to lead to his doctrine of suffering. The reason why we suffer is we're always chasing after and trying to grab hold of that something that we hope doesn't change, like wealth, beauty, youth, what have you, right? And guess what? It's going to change. And we're going to end up being dissatisfied. We're going to end up suffering, being disappointed, because what we latch onto, hoping it doesn't change, it will change. And then at the same time, we're running away from what we don't want. We don't want to grow old. We don't want to be poor. We don't want to get sick. We don't want to be crippled in a wheelchair. We don't want to be surrounded by people who are hating us or whatever, right? And so we're running away from what we don't want and chasing after what we do want. And so we're in this constant drama of hungering for and running away from, and that's what's creating the drama of suffering, human suffering. Okay, I mean, that goes into the third doctrine of suffering, is really what it's all about. But it's based on the idea that there is such a thing as permanence, that we can finally arrive at that utopia because of external things that we think are permanent, and that then will give us that solidity of, ta-da, I have arrived in utopia, I am now in heaven, and it's going to stay this wonderful bliss forever and ever and ever. And he's saying, nope, it's not the way reality is, folks. Okay, so how is reality structured? Well, what happens, where's my thing here? What happens in terms of teachings of Siddhartha and Buddhism is that they come up with the idea that reality consists of what's called, oh geez, this mark, are you kidding me? 165 dharmas. And a dharma is a particular psychophysical entity right? That there are 165 of these psychophysical entities that basically are the building blocks for reality. They are the things that will make up the world of the self, of nature, of you and I, the horse, the dog, the tree, whatever is out there. Okay, we're made up of various combinations of these dharmas. All right, they're sort of the basic fundamental substances, if you want to use that term, that make up reality. But they include consciousness. They include a psychological element. Okay. Now the key thing is these dharmas. Say this is a dharma. Once it comes into being, it causes the next dharma. Okay, these are dharmas to come into being, and as soon as this dharma has come into existence, this one ceases to exist. This one immediately causes the next one to come into being, then this one ceases to exist, and on it goes. Okay, it's sort of like a domino effect. One dharma causes the next, and as soon as it exists, it replaces the previous one, and on it goes. So it's like a flow, a constant flow of one dharma coming into being, the last one ceasing to exist. Okay, think of it like the cells in your body, and boy, it's so muggy in here. The cells in the body. You know, of the trillions of cells we always have, like here, the flesh and blood of this body. Yeah, you think this is the same Linda Christensen of whatever so many years ago. But actually, there's nothing here of substance that's the same of 10 years ago or even a year ago. Generally, it's held within 1 year. Every cell in the body has been replaced by a new cell, okay? And so this is like the dharmas. There's an old cell here, and it's going to shrivel up and start to decay, but a new cell is created that replaces the old cell. And then another new cell replaces old cell, and on it goes. So we're in constant process of being recreated, in a sense, at the cellular level. And so everything within me is not at all the same of a year ago, okay? Every new cell has replaced an old cell. And likewise with the world out there, every dharma has replaced an old dharma, a new dharma. So there's nothing there of permanent substance, okay? It's constant flow and process. So what we think is we have the experience of continuity, from which we conclude that the basis for that is an unchanging substance that's behind our experience of continuity. But really, the basis of that continuity is the linear of causal connections. That's the key thing. It's a linear chain of causal connections where one thing replaces the next in a particular line of domino effects. Okay, you can call them, Dharma dominoes. Okay, and so it's like a table will have its own particular lineage of dharmas replacing dharmas in a similar pattern. Because again, it's just a pattern of energy, right? I'm just a pattern of energy. Everything are just different patterns of energy. And so it's just a matter at the deepest subatomic level. It's these patterns of energy that one thing is replacing the next, okay, in terms of molecular, cellular structure, whatever it is. One replaces the next in a similar pattern. And that the table has its pattern, the tree has its pattern, I have my pattern, you have your pattern. We all have our own particular lineages of causal connections. And that is what gives us the experience of continuity, right? So hopefully, you get that, because this is such a fundamental concept in Buddhism, the doctrine of impermanence. But too often, I think people understand in a rather superficial way, like, oh yeah, everything changes, yeah, I got it. It's like, no, it's a lot deeper than that, because he really deconstructs and blows up the idea that there are solid, permanent substances behind things, okay? And that is why there's so much interest in Buddhism in terms of quantum physics, because we now know, in terms of our understanding of reality through quantum physics and theory and whatnot, that indeed the material world of substances has been dematerialized. And everything is made up of 99.9999, go down 9 times, empty space. Okay, 99.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Space is empty space. There really isn't solidity of substances that make up reality the way we tend to think, because that's the conclusion we tend to draw from our experience of continuity and our experience of what we call solidity, okay? Because that is the normal experience until something supernatural happens and the miraculous happens, where something happens at the quantum level, where it's like, woo, you go beyond that, right? Then it's a different ballgame, okay? But this is the key thing about the doctrine of impermanence, okay? And another metaphor I like to just bring in here is that of a movie, the old films, the reel of film, where they have each frame of a film, it's like this is a frame, that's a frame, and how they used to make cartoons, like Bugs Bunny running along, and the next movement, and the next movement, and the next movement, and so if you slow it down, you just see it's one frame replacing an old frame, replacing an old frame as the film rolls by. That is exactly how reality is here in terms of Buddhism, in terms of what the Siddhartha taught, is these dharmas replacing the past dharma. And because it's happening so fast, we have the experience of literally a Bugs Bunny running. We don't see how the new dharma replaces the old one. It happens so fast. It just seems like an unbroken, continuous flow, all right? And then from that, we come to the conclusion of unchanging substance, okay? So anyways, that's the first key doctrine, and hopefully this makes sense. Let me just take a look here. Okay, I don't know what's going on here. Hopefully this is all recording. Okay. Whew. It's really muggy in here. I might close the window. I should have left it open. So that's the doctrine of impermanence. And so, what do you think the next doctrine is going to be? Is the doctrine of, it's called no soul. Anatma. So this then, if here Siddhartha deconstructs reality out there, and says there's nothing permanent in terms of some kind of permanent substance to the world out there, he does the same thing to the self. He says there is nothing within the self that is of an eternal, unchanging substance that we often call soul. He says, where does it exist? Show it to me. Prove it to me. Where's the evidence for this? And he concludes there is nothing permanent to the self that we traditionally have referred to as a soul, as something that is, again, permanent and unchanging. Okay? And so that is, again, a lot of people don't realize this is what actually Siddhartha taught. And this is a pretty radical idea in the history of religion. And a lot of people didn't like the idea, even within Buddhism, and that led to some different sects kind of breaking away and thinking, yeah, we're just not interpreting what the Buddha taught properly. There's got to be another way of understanding this. It's very difficult for people to give up the concept that there is something permanent, something of a substantive nature that constitutes a self. We don't like that idea too much. So anyway, so what did the Buddha teach then about the self? He said the self is basically made up of these 5 components. Okay, they're called the 5 skandhas that make up the self. And skandhas, it's often translated as components, heaps, literally means just heaps, components, aggregates, okay, that make up the self. And they're basically this, the material body, physical body, okay, feelings and sensations, okay, oops, material body, feelings, sensations, perceptions, will, karmic formations. This is where karma gets created, is through the will, okay, and consciousness. Okay. And so these are the 5 things. These are the 5 things that make up the self, according to Siddhartha. And these are the 5 parts. You put together, ta-da, there's the self. And he taught that none of these is permanent in nature. That at death, they all dissipate. Okay, that is what Siddhartha taught himself. Later schools of Buddhism are going to tweak this quite a bit. Okay, it's going to get reinterpreted later on, and so that's why, as I said in another video, is there's a lot of different sects within Buddhism, various teachings, almost like different religions. Okay, but this is specifically what Siddhartha taught. He said that at death, none of these are permanent and they will dissipate. So that raises a big question. And this is one key area why and where and how Buddhism is quite different from Hinduism, and why the Buddha becomes a whole new religion. He does teach some very different things that are going to be part of classical Hinduism. Classical Hinduism is very much committed to the idea that you have a soul, okay, Atman, and that with respect to the world reality, there is a supreme being, Brahman, that's kind of the supreme being that is the source and essence of the whole universe. That the universe is a manifestation of the supreme being in Hinduism, right? Well, Siddhartha, as he deconstructs reality, he also deconstructs and says, where on earth is this universal essence of a supreme being that is the basis of the universe that you guys call Brahman? Where on earth is it? I don't see it. Prove it to me. I don't think it exists. And so he rejected this key concept. He also rejected this key concept. Okay, and but he still held that we are trapped in the wheel of existence, and there's rebirth. So how on earth does that work? How is there rebirth without soul? Okay, how is it that there is this phenomena of rebirth but without a soul? And Siddhartha held that, okay, the reason why we conclude that there is a soul is, again, this idea of continuity. We think that there's one life incarnates, one life incarnates, one life incarnates, that we call the cycle of rebirth. This is what usually is called transmigration of the soul or reincarnation. And so in Hinduism, it's how there literally is a soul as a substance, as a thing that incarnates again and again in this life form, in that life form, in this life and that life, but it's always the same soul that's reincarnating, okay? And that there's continuity between, this is life number 1, life number 2, life number 3, life number 4, etc. There's a continuity of life forms, right? Siddhartha held that the continuity between life forms is not because there is this substance of a soul that's always incarnating. Instead, the basis of that continuity, I'm going to use a different color marker. Whoops, this is really awkward. That's why I love my classroom. I miss my classroom. The basis of that continuity is karmic causal connections. Okay. The karma that's generated in this lifetime creates the karma, or I shouldn't say that karma creates another life form to come into being, to take up and pick up that karma. And the karma from this life form generates that energy that's going to cause another life form to come into being to play out the karma of that previous life. Are you guys with me? So it's always the karma from one life that is sort of the power engine, the generator that births forth another life form to take on and pick up and carry on that karmic energy of a previous life form. And so the connection between one life and the next is simply one of karmic connections, karmic causal links. And so when Siddhartha remembered his past lives, right, it's not that it's like, oh, it was in his soul and his soul incarnated again and the memory is somehow in his soul and he's able to tap into it. No. He could just see all the causal connections of the previous life forms that led to his life, the present life form that he was. Okay, and it's just a matter of vision of those past karmic connections. Now again, there'll be a lot of debate about this in Buddhism. This is a very radical idea, and most people don't like this idea. Okay, but it's also another idea that many people in Western society, secular society that doesn't really want to believe in a God as a supreme being, secular society that doesn't like this spooky stuff about soul and an afterlife and heaven, hell kind of stuff, you know. They don't really like all those supernatural kind of things. Buddhism is a religion that many secularists really attach to and link up with. Okay, something like, what's his name? Harris. What's his first name? You know, he's written a few books, and now I forget what they all are. Not David Harris. Anyway, last name is Harris. But there's a lot of these people in here that see how science can link in with spirituality, but it's a secularized kind of spirituality, one that doesn't involve traditional religious kind of ideas of a supreme being and a soul and various planes of reality maybe. And it's like, no, just let me meditate and live a life of compassion and I don't know, whatever, and have it blend in with quantum physics a bit, and I'm cool, you know? Anyway, but this is a key thing, this is how rebirth gets understood. So there still is the issue of rebirth, okay, the cycle of rebirth, but it's not the incarnation of a soul, right? And yes, we are to stop this karmic event, to set future life forms free, to stop this cycle of suffering, because rebirth, coming into this world, living in this world, this is a world of suffering. And that is the third key doctrine here in the 3 marks of existence, is the doctrine of suffering. Life here is suffering, right? And so you want to stop the cycle of rebirth and stop the ongoing drama of suffering for all life forms. So you want to stop generating a karma so that you're not going to create and push forth another life form. You're stopping it here and now in your life through the choices that you make and through by becoming enlightened and in not getting caught up in the drama of wanting and not wanting, because that's how we create the karma, as I had mentioned in a previous video, okay, when I talked about how I became enlightened. Anyway, hopefully that's all good and makes sense, all right? Okay, let me just see here. Whew, I think... Okay. So these are the 3 marks of existence: the doctrine of impermanence, the doctrine of no soul, the doctrine of suffering. I kind of already went through that a bit, is that our experience here on planet Earth is one of suffering, the constant drama of wanting and not wanting. So that if we do get what we want, it's not going to last. It's not going to last. And our dreams, we may be filled, we may have that dream job and the dream hot babe that we're married to or whatever. And after 10, 20 years, you think, what on earth did I see in this jerk? I can't stand them. Or the wealth that you had, you lose it all, or you find it meaningless. Things change. And you went after all these things and disappointment, dissatisfaction, frustration, right? In the meantime, you're running away from things you don't want. You don't want to get sick. You don't want to get the COVID-19 virus or who knows what else, right? So you're always running away from things you don't want and chasing after things you do want. And whatever you do get, it doesn't last. So life is one of perpetual frustration, dissatisfaction, okay, suffering. Why? Because we're caught in this freaking drama of wanting and not wanting. And that's why in Buddhism, so much teaching is focused on letting it go, detachment, right? Detachment. Just let it go. Stop that whole game of wanting and not wanting, right? And the reason we're wanting and not wanting is because of our ignorance. Okay, it's because of our ignorance. We don't know who we really are. We don't know how it all really works. We think that this is what I really should do, is go after this and run away from that, and then I'll finally be happy, and then I'm really living. And it's like we're all deluded about the nature of reality and the nature of the self. When you become enlightened and see the truth of how it all works, that ignorance is removed, you're not going to be caught in the drama anymore. You'll be set free from that whole drama. And if you're set free from that drama, you're not creating that karmic energy. Okay, it's like whoosh, it's just all gone, finito. All right, and then you'll be set free from suffering now in this life and future suffering in terms of karmic energy being transmitted into future life forms. Okay, so that's a key thing. That's a key, and that's what Nirvana is all about. Nirvana literally means to blow out, to extinguish, like blowing out a candle. Okay, got that down here. To blow out, extinguish a candle. Maybe I'll just go on with this one here. And so that's the meaning of Nirvana. So the way the Siddhartha put it is, oh, it's falling over. Oh, it's all falling over. I wish I had more room. Okay, the way you have samsara here and nirvana over here. The way Siddhartha always taught about samsara and nirvana is though they're mutually exclusive opposites. And this is really important because later on in Mahayana Buddhism, this is going to be changed radically. When you get into Zen, where they're going to say Nirvana is here now, right? It's a whole other ballgame. But the way Siddhartha put it is we are now in the place of samsara. This is the wheel of existence, the cycle of rebirth that we're in. This is a place of suffering. This is the place of rebirth. And this is a place of impermanence. Whereas nirvana is when you're set free from samsara. That is the goal here in both Buddhism and Hinduism, is to be set free from the cycle of rebirth. All right, to be set free from this realm of continual rebirth, which is seen as suffering. You grow old just to get sick and die. Grow old just to get sick and die. This is not good news. All right, it's only good news to Westerners who think, wow, this is such a cool idea. I get to come back here again. But historically, in the East, it's like you want to be set free from this cycle. This is bad news, just to come back and suffer again and again and again. So you want to be set free from the suffering. So nirvana is no more suffering. Okay? And there's no more suffering right now and in the future. Okay, you're set free from all suffering. No more rebirth. You're set free from any kind of rebirth and perpetuating the cycle of rebirth. And it's also, here he held, it's permanent. Okay, it's permanent. And as I mentioned, nirvana literally means to blow out, extinguish. Okay, it's like blowing out a candle, extinguishing the fire of karma that generates another life form and another life form that keeps you in bondage to the cycle of rebirth. It's like you just blow out, extinguish it, okay? And that's what sort of nirvana is. And it doesn't mean to extinguish the self because there's no self to be extinguished to begin with, right? It's your attachment and beliefs that are extinguished. That is what's being extinguished here, okay? And so what happens, oh gosh, he's cooking here. When Siddhartha starts teaching his stuff, and he would run into other holy men, enlightened ones, whatever teachers at the time, and they says, geez, you're teaching nirvana, to extinguish, blow out. you seem to be a nihilist, Siddhartha. It seems that what you teach is that when you die at death, what happens after death? They say you teach a form of nihilism, that you simply cease to be. This is how they understood it. They called it annihilationism, was sort of the term that you'll find in texts. Okay, annihilationism. Okay. That you teach a form of annihilationism, that once his body is dead and gone, it's like, no more you. You cease to exist, cease to be. No more Linda Christensen or whoever, you know. It's a form of nihilism. And that's what they accused him of. And he says, no, I don't teach that. Oh, really? Oh, then do you teach a form of eternalism? That there is something in the self that continues to be. Because this is the whole question with respect to self. You know, do you cease to be or continue to be? You know, is Shakespeare to be or not to be? What's the scoop here? Siddhartha, what happens when you die? Do you still continue to exist in some way or in some form? Or do you simply cease to exist? All right? And now, are you getting annihilated? Or is there something eternal to the self that continues? Right? And Siddhartha says, no, I don't teach annihilationism, that you cease to be. And I also do not teach eternalism, that you continue to be. And they're thinking like, what on earth are you teaching? You know, that makes no sense. This is illogical. Either you are or you aren't. What could you be in between? Because he says, no, I teach the middle way. I teach the middle way. It's neither being or not being, ceasing to exist or continuing to exist. I teach the middle way. And they're scratching their heads like, what? You know, how on earth does this work? What does that mean? How is there a middle way between being and not being? Right? And he says, oh, yeah. For those who are unenlightened, for those who are still here trapped in some samsara and they're unenlightened, they cannot understand nirvana. It's only when you attain nirvana can you understand what this all is about. Right? That is basically beyond our conception, or beyond our understanding at this level of the game. To the unenlightened mind, they can't understand it. Okay, so the metaphor that's used here is that it's like you know, you have a pond full of tadpoles, and some of there'll be a tadpole that's a little bit more advanced. So he starts really growing his legs, and he's starting to, I don't know how it all works for the frog, you know, becomes more of a frog, you know, gets his lungs working, and he's able to hop out of the water and breathe air. And he hops around out there and he breathes air, and he sees the grass and the trees, and there's bugs and birds and, you know, all kinds of stuff out there, this whole new world. And then he goes back into the pond to meet his buddies who are still tadpoles, and who just are living in the water like fish. And he's trying to explain to them, oh wow, you wouldn't believe how cool it is out there. You can breathe in air, and there's clouds and skies and the sun and these trees and birds and this and that. And they're all looking at this guy like, woohoo, what's with him? Makes no sense. What on earth is he talking about? They can't at all relate to what he's saying. Okay, and so here the idea is that our concepts and perception and conception of reality and what we've experienced, all right, is going to be limited to this level of reality that we have experienced. We've only able to conceive of certain things in this game. We only have certain categories of thought, all right, that are tied in with the experience we have in this life, in this world. And it's only when you transcend that and become enlightened, that you then can start to conceive and perceive, because you've experienced, you've transcended, that you can then perceive other ways of beingness, if you want to use that word even, right? That goes beyond our categories of thought, that goes beyond the language that we're limited to in this realm. And so that's kind of the answer that's presented in Buddhism here, okay? That it's something quite transcendent in nature. It can't be understood until you're enlightened. It is literally totally different way of thinking about reality and the self here. Right? And so this is where it's really quite open-ended. How does this get understood? Where do you go with this? Okay, there'd be, you know, who knows, all kinds of possibilities, right? But this is basically what Siddhartha taught, and not easy stuff. Okay, and what's going to happen, it's all a long story. There's always so much, and I don't like teaching in this kind of a format. But anyway, what's going to happen is that this kind of teaching that's not for everybody, that's for sure, is very philosophical, very much deconstructs reality in the self. And for the masses of ordinary people, it's not really going to work too well. It's not going to work too well. They're still going to want to pray and call upon a higher being to help them out in life. They're still going to want to believe that their dead ancestors are around and they need to look after their dead ancestors and give prayers to their dead ancestors, right? So a lot of various aspects of human experience in terms of spiritual things don't fit in with this teaching, but they're going to get added on. And as I'm not going to explain here, because again, I could talk for hours on this, this is how then Buddhism will incorporate elements of things down the road where the lay people, those who don't enter into the monastic life, the lay people, they will then, they will kind of still have local deities that they will pray to, because those gods still exist. I didn't do that yet. But when I talk about the 6 realms of rebirth, there are the heavenly realms. And there are these super beings, these gods that exist up there. And there are demigods and sort of like angelic kind of good spirits and bad spirits. They're all these realms of existence. But as I mentioned in another video, the Buddha is greater than the gods because he's outside of these realms of existence. He's beyond the heavens, all right? He's up, who knows where, whatever he is. We can't even think of him as a being at all, according to his teachings. It's like, whoa, he's not around. But yet, people will want to pray to Buddha-sized beings. They're going to become known as the Bodhisattvas, a lot of them, Bodhisattvas, and various Buddha-type figures who will hear their prayers, who have chosen to stick around and be in the heavens to help us out, answer our prayers, and be there, and so they'll bring that back in that form. But what the Buddha taught is you're meant to transcend that. You're meant to go beyond that, okay? But that's pretty difficult for a lot of people to accept. All right, well, I think I'm going to end this here and do another one on some other stuff and see if this works. Okay, ciao. Okay, so how do I end this here?